Today, I'm excited to be chatting with cast member of season 1 of the Netflix show Love is Blind. He's the host of Why Do Men, which is such a great title for a podcast, and co-founder of the Shoulder to Shoulder community. Today, I welcome Tom Stroud. How did you become Tom Stroud?
Oh, great one. God, where to start with that? Well, I suppose, obviously the show is like a big talking point, and it actually was a big reason why I am the person I am today. But if I was to summarise my response to that in an easy, digestible way, I grew up as a child in a single-parent family with a working mum who was on benefits when she raised me and my little brother. And anyone who's sort of done any internal work, therapy, etc., you quickly come to realise how your childhood shapes your adult experience, your views, your values, and that kind of thing. And it's really interesting because the show ties into this as well, how my views of the world, my opinion on things like equality and feminism and values have all been shaped by how I was raised by a mum who was amazing and kind of did everything really. And that shaped my values. And through the show, I've had to really interrogate a lot of them to figure out whether they're not just my own sort of childhood responses to certain scenarios or behaviours, or are they actually what I really believe. So I think childhood to adults are a really interesting talking point.
I often observe people, they feel they've got these very strong values, but once you look under the hood of it all, you realise that actually it's their caregivers' preferences disguised as values. And that's why there's the conflict. I've said it before on the podcast, but I've had clients before that would tell me they really value a tidy home, for example. And then you're looking in the background and it's like chaos. And you're like, I'm not sure that's true. And it turns out that their parents loved a tidy home and they thought it was a value. So yeah, I can totally see that. I resonate with you on that because I grew up in a domestic violence situation, so my mum pretty much did everything. It's interesting the impact it has on a man when they are taught to be a man by a woman. It's a very interesting thing.
So, and this is the thing, right? And I learned so many amazing things from my mum growing up, and I've always been told, by women that my emotional availability, my emotional intelligence, my ability to make women feel safe and heard emotionally is really good. And you can sort of track that back to my relationship with my mum. But there's another side to that coin as well, where it's like masculinity, like a massive talking point. I didn't have any male role models as a kid. And I found that has also had quite a difficult impact on me, and not just in my own internal value system, but also like the way that I present myself to romantic partners, and sort of quite old-fashioned chivalrous behaviour is something which I didn't even know existed. Like the concept of like holding a door open for a woman as she walks through, or standing on the right side of the pavement when you're walking down the pavement, like these weren't even like known concepts to me. And to my earlier point, like they're things which I've had to pick up to recognise that some of it I think is bullshit, and some of it I think is like old fashioned and is about, pushing women down and making women submissive. But I think a lot of it is actually, it's right, because there are differences in gender in terms of our strength and our ability to protect. And that's stuff which I've had to learn pretty late in life.
It's funny, isn't it? It felt with that because I had such a shocking role model, which was very much about anger, aggression, violence, and all of those things, is that I found myself taking such an observational perspective when it came to men. I would just watch and watch and watch and mimic. And I think that's got some good things to it. But also what I think happened was when I mimicked those things, I didn't understand them. I just copied them and without any understanding of what it meant and what I was doing. Did you find that?
Yeah, 100%. If you ever met my mum, maybe you bumped into her in the Southwest, like we are basically the same person, and I admire her hugely, right? She was the only role model I had as a kid, and she's very, very outgoing, very confident, extroverted, takes her energy from other people, and I'm exactly the same. But as you grow up, to your point, like you start also seeing the flaws in your caregivers, and it sounds like the flaws in your caregiver were pretty apparent from a very early stage. But for me, I had to interrogate that, and weirdly it's made my relationship with my mum better, because rather than sort of seeing her as this like pariah and putting her in a pedestal and being deeply disappointed if she behaved in a way which I disliked, it's put us on an equal playing field. And now like I'm as much her caregiver as she is mine, and that's improved our relationship immeasurably.
I really relate to that. Yeah, because it's funny, isn't it, as that sort of shift happens. There's been times where unfairly perhaps I've thought to myself, where's that woman I remember when I was younger? But this is what happens when you get older, and your kids do take more of a role. Only the other day, I couldn't get the iPad to work, and my son was like, "Give it here," and within seconds he did it. And I was like, "How?" You know, just a small example, but
Yeah.
that role does change. So that was your start. How did you navigate that? How did you navigate that being brought up by a woman, your mother? Was you the oldest, out of interest?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So was there a sense of responsibility on your side?
Absolutely not. No, I went
No?
completely the other way. I mean, I was a very angry, frustrated kid, and the main reason for that was it was about abandonment and about these male role models. My father specifically, he was just not a great dad, not able to be accountable, not able to show up for his kids. I had a moment when I was obsessed with my dad because I just felt this absence in my life, and how that manifested itself when I would be with my mum, which was the vast majority of the time, was I'd feel anger because there was this sort of subconscious thing where I felt she was to blame for the breakup of that relationship. In retrospect, that wasn't the case at all. But so I would just lash out and constantly rebel, and it got pretty difficult. It got to a stage where, you know, social services had to get involved when I was 10, and there was a big meeting with lots of therapists, and my dad was called down. He lived in London. I'd see him like once a year, and the way that the conversation netted out was basically like, you're going to have to try and take care of this kid because it's the only way we're going to fix some of these issues. And so he took me in for a year, lived in London with him and his sort of slightly younger girlfriend. And I went on holiday the summer. So I'd been living with him for a year, went on holiday for the summer with my mum and was due to go back, and I'd got a scholarship. I was a very academic kid, got a scholarship to this private school called Sunbury Manor in West London. And I came back, and my mum was due to drop me off back at my dad's, and sort of knocked on the door, and it basically just disappeared. It'd done a runner. And so we were sort of trying to call him. It's something which comes up a lot in therapy, is like this, I have this dream of this like door which I can't get into, and it's because of that. So my mum had to like rush around 3 days before the start of term to get me into secondary school, find me a school, and that was the last time I saw him.
That's tough. What age was that?
I was 11.
That's quite a devastating thing to happen at 11 years old.
Huge. And this, I said at the top of the episode, like starting to interrogate how that kind of behavior shapes you, like it's so deep, and it takes so much work to really figure it out. And I mean, I know that you're going to have a lot of listeners that come from these sort of broken homes, single parent families and stuff. And a lot of the work that I've done to understand that is stuff which I now try and communicate through like my own social channels, for example, because it's so valuable for people. I see so many people going through life feeling angry or hurt or upset, and a lot of it's about that stuff, about parental caregiver stuff.
Well, they're our trainers, aren't they? They train us. A lot of our attachment styles come from how we were shown love or how we were directed towards love. This might be an intrusive question, so shut it down if you feel it is. But if you were to take the perspective that your anger was a reaction to a primary emotion, what would you, because I think in a lot of cases when people come up against anger, there's that whole don't be angry, what are you angry about? And quite a lot of the time people don't know why they're angry, which only really adds to the anger because it creates frustration. So if we were to take the view that that anger was a reaction to another emotion, what do you think it would have been?
I guess it's not really an emotion, but it's just a desire to be nurtured and held by the man that is supposed to do that, the man that's supposed to teach you and guide you and educate you. And I just felt this huge piece of me that was missing throughout my childhood, my teens, my 20s, because I didn't have that. But but interestingly, like that point around anger is a really good one, because as an adult, that's an emotion which I don't express. I never express it.
Do you feel afraid of it?
Yeah. And I think it's because I realised the impact that showcasing that emotion had on my parents and my loved ones as a kid. My little brother in particular, like he was just squashed by me constantly needing attention and constantly desiring this validation to be seen by the people around me. So as an adult, I've always seen it as something that you just can't express because of that feeling, because I knew in my sort of conscious mind, subconscious, whatever, like the impact that it was having on other people. I'm never angry now. And actually, I want to do more work to try and release some of that stuff.
I can imagine you'd have had guilt about that too, which is just perfect with anger, right?
Right, exactly.
Like guilt and anger together. Can I offer an emotion just to explore it, or again shut it down? But
course.
you talk about that needing that or wanting that validation. Could the primary emotion have been rejection?
Yeah, absolutely that. You know,
Yeah.
I speak a lot on my pod about rejection. We did a whole episode in it a few episodes ago because I've spent my whole life avoiding that feeling of being rejected for obvious reasons, but it's really interesting to see how that shows up in different parts of your life, because it's not just romantically. Like, that's the go-to when people are like, I'm scared of rejection. I'd never approach someone in a bar because I'd be worried about being rejected. But for me, it showed up in every part of my life. So if I think about my professional career, like I work for PR agencies, I'm very lucky. It's a really good, interesting, creative job. And the way that fear showed up, certainly the early part of my career, was the constant need to be validated, the constant need to be doing a good job, the total fear of someone picking the smallest hole on you because of that feeling that would be raised from your child self. And it actually made me shit at my job, because rather than thinking I'm going to take a step back, I'm going to think about how I'm going to present myself, how I'm going to approach this problem strategically. I just need to do a good job. So burn myself out, work every hour of every day, just because I was just seeking the approval of the people in the business and my clients.
Oh, mate, thank you for saying that, because that is quite often the fuel for a high performer, but it's unsustainable. And that constant routine of burnout is such a thing that happens with people that are high performers in life. And it's difficult. It's really difficult. One of the things that I did, because I cannot articulate without dominating the conversation.
No, please do. Please do.
No, I can't articulate how much I resonate with that. And when I was writing my book, the beauty of writing my book was that I have these wild concepts. I think it's why I'm able to help people in the way in which I do, which is a very realistic approach to helping people and very much puts them in the driver's seat. But I had to try and get things down to a really simple way of thinking about things. And what I came to was, I think that ultimately in life, most human beings are motivated by fear or need. And I think if you're motivated by fear, quite often that will dictate what you do next. It will tell you have to do this because otherwise this will happen, or you have to do this because this won't happen, and all these different things. But actually the shift for me was the practice, and that's the key word, practice, because it removes the pressure of perfection. It's the practice of focusing on the need, not the fear. So what do I need from this? Because now you're putting yourself in the equation, which we're not good at, right? Because we're not prioritizing ourselves when we're worried about rejection, because we're prioritizing what the other person might think of us, you know, which is a difficult one. So for me, it was about recognizing, what do I need from this situation? Which, if I'm honest, at times felt like the most impossible question to answer. So the reason I bring that up is because I wonder, in those scenarios, what do you think it is that you needed?
It's a really good question, Johnny. And I don't know, I'm sort of thinking about a lot of the feelings that have come up for me as an adult, and particularly around men, and particularly around like massive distrust of men. And it talks about in the workplace, like if I had a male boss, my automatic reaction would be like discredit them, reject them, show them that I was better at their job than they were. And that all came from a place of, anger and hurt, and wanting to sort of hold my dad to account, I suppose, and seeing my father and those men in authority figures. So what I needed was some softness and some understanding and some empathy, I guess, because that's the thing that I never got from my dad.
That's incredible. What great self-awareness and self-evaluation, just to be able to realize that, because again, that must have and will feel like the last thing you want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's giving me goosebumps just talking about this stuff,
Well, this is what the podcast is about. It's about exploring real human emotions, and sometimes there are no resolutions, and this is the thing, like quite often and it's annoying, but I think it's true. Quite often the end result is acceptance, and this is what people say to me, oh Johnny, I'm trying to accept, I'm working on acceptance. And I say, see, there's the problem. See, acceptance is not a doing word. It has no action attached to it. If you are trying to do anything, you're trying to change it so you can accept it. Actually, acceptance is just letting something be. And it's like, well, I don't like that. Yeah, yeah, I get it. Do you accept that your dad beat you, tortured your family, Johnny? No, I don't accept that. Okay, well, how do you feel about it? Angry. Oh, why are you angry? Because I felt helpless. Okay, do you accept that you felt helpless? Yes. But now I'm on the path to acceptance.
Yeah.
I don't love it, but I'm on it. Do you know what I mean? And that's it. It's about trying to find a way around it. And here's the thing, quite often when we have therapy and stuff, we try to intellectualize traumas. And that'll take you a fair way, but at some point, and I think it's the stage I'm at, you have to do the body work, because that stuff's stuck. That's why you have that gut health. That's why you have that headache. That's why you have that rash. That's why you have that back pain. That's why you have these things going on. Not you, but I'm saying me. Yeah. It's because that body work still needs doing. And it's interesting how I avoid that. You talk about breath work. You talk about cold water submersion. I get all like, oh, that's all right. It's mate, there's a reason I avoid it. It's because I know it's going to break me open. I'm going to be like crying for 3 days, probably.
Yeah. But that's interesting. You did mention something there, Johnny, which I found really interesting, which was like, I spoke at the top of the episode about values and how they're informed by your upbringing. And sometimes it's not as simple as like, my mum's like this, therefore I am like this too. Like, it's born out of your own experiences as well. And when I think about my dad, for example, and then how I show up, like, probably my biggest value, which sounds pretty niche, is about accountability. Because it frustrates me when, I don't know, say if I'm dating someone and they're like, oh, I've got to cancel last minute. I'm like, be accountable for that, put in another date in the diary and apologise. Or if I show up in a work context and one of my teams missed the deadline, I'm like, tell me you're going to miss the deadline. Tell me when you can hit the deadline, right? And I'm obsessive about this stuff, like too much so. I don't give people enough of a chance, but that's because of the way that my dad made me feel and the fact that he wasn't accountable for his behaviour at all. This is a guy that, and I don't want to sort of talk about him too much, but like, so he passed away last summer, and his sister, who was sort of managing his estate, got in touch with us the January before. So he had 4 kids, 2 sisters, little sisters, my half sisters, and my little brother and me, and got in touch with us out of the blue and was like, look, your dad's kind of on his last legs. I wanted to make you aware. A few months went by, and then she reached out again, and she was like, he's just expressed a desire to see you. And my immediate reaction was like, fuck no, I'm not going to see him. And then you sort of, like, look at all he's done to us. Like, and then you sort of had a bit of time to reflect on it. And I was like, well, no, that's not the right approach. The right approach is about forgiveness. He's going to pass away. And that's the thing that's going to probably make you feel slightly more healed, to use one of those wanky industry words. But so... yeah, and I was like, and that made me feel incredible, like having that realization of just being like, well, rather than hold him to account and punishing him for his behavior, I'm gonna give him what he wants, and maybe I'll get something out of it as well. Ironically enough, the day came when we went to visit him, and the morning of he cancelled, and that was. But even so. But I'd still made that decision. And so I'd come to terms with it, and I still feel at peace with it now. And weirdly, I mean, we all went to his funeral like a few weeks later. It was the 4 siblings and his sister at his funeral. And it was just a good sort of bit of evidence as to how, if you live your life in an avoidant, filled with shame way, that's kind of the output.
You've touched upon something that quietly in the back of my mind, I'm always curious of, maybe slightly intimidated by, and it's like, what will happen when my father passes away? Because the violence and the things that I saw him do, that's part of what created the PTSD for me for such a long time, which was what led to the use of alcohol. So it's incredible. I don't know what to say to that. First and foremost, I admire you for the way that you dealt with that. And I think that life will almost definitely, for everybody, throw horrendous situations at us. And I think that you can't go back and change events. You can maybe look at the emotions behind the events and the emotional imprints, but really, when big things happen like that, to be able to be proud of the way that you dealt with it is massive.
In spite of someone else's behaviour, that's the thing. You're so right. Like,
it's massive. It's all you've got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's it. Like, if you're obsessed with changing other people all the time, you're going to end up unhappy. Like, the only thing you have is yourself, your true self. And as long as you can stay true to that, then everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you talk again about values. One of my values is, sounds really weird and sadistic, but one of them is suffering. And it's because the thing that you were looking for is found in the thing that you're avoiding. And for the middle part of my life so far, suffering was something I experienced. I had no autonomy over because I was small. But as I got to a point where I did have autonomy over it, I avoided suffering. And now I come back around and realize that it's only when I leaned into the suffering did I find what I needed. I don't want that to be true. Believe me, I would not want that to be true. But when I stop and I think about it, even if you use the analogy of women giving birth, there's a large part of suffering to that. There's a lot of suffering in the whole experience of life, sounding very Buddhist. But so for me now, the reason I make suffering one of my values is because I have this natural, understandable inclination to avoid suffering, which reminds me it's a value, which then says, be curious about this. What's here? And one of the reasons I frequently go out and climb ridiculous mountains is because I talk a lot of trash about myself, and I think, let's see if you're full of shit or not. Let's go off in the mountain, because the mountain doesn't care. The mountain will throw the suffering on you, and it will say, what's up? You're tired. What's the matter? You need a break. You got altitude sickness. Your legs hurt. I don't care. You're cold. Don't care. Hot. Don't care. It just throws the suffering at you and lets you do what you want with it. Do you want to get to the top, Johnny? Do you not? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I kind of use it as a cue, but one of the other things that I found interesting there was, I don't know if you did it intentionally, but seemed like there was a comparison there, or at least you're putting them together, that forgiveness and acceptance.
Yeah.
There's a difference, right?
I suppose so, yeah. I mean, but my interpretation of that, which you may have a different view on, is that, acceptance is about acceptance of your own stuff, and like accepting all of the maybe flaws that you have, being okay with those things, being comfortable with them. And then for me, forgiveness is about external things, that's sort of the difference for me.
That's a lovely analogy. I've never heard it put that way before. I
just made it up, Johnny. I don't know if it's right or not.
Copyright it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think where people perhaps go wrong and they go really far down the road with acceptance is, you're exactly right. They're trying to accept external events that either have happened and they can't change, or someone else is accountable for. So they can't change it. And I think that really when acceptance comes into play and works its best is when you accept how you feel about a situation. It's okay to feel rejected. It's okay to feel helpless. Because once you then accept it, you own it. If you own it, you can do something about it, which means you can let it go. And don't get me wrong, there'll be days I accept the way my childhood was. There are days I unaccept it and I'm having a bad day, tired, hungry, whatever, But by and by, I accept the way things are, It is what it is. I accept the emotions I have about it. What choice do I have?
That thing about suffering as well is really interesting, because have you ever read a book called The Solve for Happy by Mo Gawdat? He's like this.
No, but that is the second time someone's brought that book up this week.
Really?
That's bizarre.
Honestly.
That is bizarre.
And this is a good book. Like, I'm not as well read as I'm sure some of the other podcast guests are, but it was something that really resonated with me in that book. And it was about the difference between pain and suffering. And pain is the event and, the impact that has on you in the immediacy. The suffering bit is almost the bit which is imposed on you by yourself. So say if there is a bereavement, the pain comes from the bereavement, dealing with that. The suffering then comes from your reaction to it. And so there's an element of choice within suffering, whereas like I can either labor on this for years and years and years and think about the gap that person's left in my life, or I can flip it on its head and lean into it and maybe even do something proactive and do something about it. And it's the same with your mountain analogy. Like, if your suffering is self-imposed, then it's like, I just feel fucking rubbish. I don't want to get up and I don't want to climb this mountain. That's one choice. Or you can just be like, what an amazing test, challenge, experience this is. And I'm going to really go for it and lean into it.
Yeah, that's exactly it, man. That you've just nailed it. Because it's like, I'm not a huge fan, and you talk about wanky industry terms, like the word resilience, I get it. I know what it is. I know what it means, but I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is because it's a word that other people use to describe your suffering. So they go, oh my gosh, you're so resilient. It's like, I don't freaking feel resilient.
No, exactly.
I feel like I'm breaking.
Exactly. I don't want to be resilient.
I want to break.
Circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. So it causes me a lot of frustration. And I was once offered a different word, which is anti-fragility. And I think what you're talking about there is that you have these moments of suffering that, and this is going to be very difficult for some people to hear. What if it's a gift? What if that suffering, and I'm not talking about all suffering, there are some things that aren't, obviously, but what if in that suffering it's an opportunity for you to build that resilience that you will come to value, that anti-fragility, which is only then given to you when you have been tested. Like you go to the gym and you break down the muscles, right? You have to lift heavy weights. You have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. You have to go through pain and discomfort. And then the next day we're rubbing those muscles and going, yeah, I can feel it today. But yet when we have those emotional breaks, those emotional damage that gets caused, we look at it with criticism and we say, no, I don't want this. I don't want this. This must mean something's wrong. Well, no, it's the consequence of growing.
Yeah.
And if you can embrace that, if you can lean into it, if you can absorb it, then you become resilient. It's interesting. My brother said to me once, I was saying to him about how I wanted to become this type of person, and he started laughing, and I thought he was mugging me off. I was like, what are you doing? And he says, Johnny, you already are.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's about recognizing that we, in all of this suffering, look at the person it's created. I mean, look at you, look at the things that you've achieved. And here's the kicker. You go back and you take away some of those moments that were horrible and horrendous at the time. Are you who you are today? Probably not.
This is it, man. If I think about the circumstances I grew up in, we grew up poor. We lived in a council flat, and there's a yin and a yang to every single reaction. And for me, it was like, right, my reaction to that is going to be, I want to really make a success in my life. I'm not going to stop until I'm doing things that I'm proud of, and having a job at my best PR agencies in the country, and going on TV shows and traveling and doing all these amazing things. But then the yang to that is, it's great to have that aspiration, but I struggle with contentment. I always want more. And that's, so, I mean, we spoke about this last time we met, didn't we? Where's the line? Like, where's the line when you're just like, I'm content and happy now with what I've achieved?
Yeah, I don't know if there is one. And that's okay. Because you get people like, and forgive me if I forget his name, the old fella through COVID that walked up and down his garden.
Captain Tom.
That's right. Imagine he'd said, I can't be asked. Do you know what I mean? Think about all the stuff that would have been forgotten about. So it's never too late, really, to keep pushing forward. And it's that illusion that we're supposed to be perfect in some way. When I think that actually the more flawed you are, the more it brings out parts of who you are. These suffering, these difficult moments, they have to be there in order to bring out those versions of you that are necessary. Yeah. Like I said to you, no one's sat around getting imposter syndrome watching Netflix. It's because they're not doing anything hard. You're not there going, is that the right button?
Exactly. I'm suffering because I can't turn the volume up.
Yeah, exactly that. But I mean, mate, this is what I mean about questions and conversation. That was a wonderful conversation, although albeit hard to hear some of the stuff. But I mean, you mentioned the TV show.
Yeah.
What do you think you learned about yourself from that experience on Love is Blind?
So yeah, let's to take the sort of analogy around forgiveness being external and then acceptance being internal. Like the stuff I learned about myself, it was amazing. Like it taught me so much about what I'm looking for in a romantic partner, or even more so, what people need to look for in a romantic partner. Because honestly, mate, I was 37 when I went on that show. I thought I was pretty good at understanding myself, my view of the world. And I wasn't. Like, I thought that finding a partner was like vibes. Like, I thought it was about that sort of spark, connection. And of course, there's an element of that, and it's very, very important. But if your values don't align, if your ambitions, if what you want to achieve in your life don't align, you're pretty much, you're screwed. Like, hobbies, interests, that stuff can differ. Sometimes you can learn from each other, but core values have to be aligned 100%.
Yeah. What do you think about conflicting values? Because in some ways, what I'm saying when I say that is that a lot of mine and my wife's values align. However, there are subtle differences that I feel challenge me to be slightly better.
That's the thing. I mean, no one's ever going to say they have negative values, right? They're all meant to be things which create a good version of yourself. But within that, there are nuances. So if one of your values is family, for example, which I know isn't strictly speaking a value, that can mean different things to different people, or it can have an impact on some of your other values. So some people are my circumstance was exactly this. Some people are incredibly family orientated, which I think is so important, and it's probably something that I need to lean into more. That has an impact on your ability to be ambitious and grow. It's really, really difficult to navigate a lot of this stuff.
When you say ambitious, what do you think it is ultimately? What is it you think you're chasing?
Yes, a really good question. I used to think ambitious was about status, material things, wealth accumulation. But now my idea of ambition is driven by fear. It's driven by not wanting to be on my deathbed and have the same experience that my father had, like having lived a life of shame, regret, like, and 5 people at his funeral. Like, I want to lie down on my deathbed and think, look at all the stuff I've achieved, and look at all these people that, you know, I've touched, I've helped, I've interacted with.
So what's the opposite of that? What is it? So that's what you're avoiding. What are you chasing?
So, yeah, I think again, it probably ties into some childhood stuff. There's an element of like validation that I probably still look for, if I'm being really honest.
Yeah.
I want people to look at me and think, wow, he's done an amazing job, or he's someone that I can learn from, or he's someone I admire, or someone I aspire to be, you know, a role model.
I love that, because here's something that most blokes don't feel they're allowed to say is, I want recognition.
Yeah, oh, man, it's such
Because
a
it sounds so,
mad
it sounds
thing.
arrogant, doesn't it? But it's
Yeah.
not. It's like, I want the recognition. It took me a while to realize that some of the things that I teach, some of the things that I do, I would like recognition for that. And even now I'm like, ugh, ick, sounds horrible, but if it's your true value, if recognition is a true value, that's okay. It's yours.
Yeah,
You don't have to
exactly.
justify it.
And sadly, mate, like even there's that point around like there are different ways that can shape itself, because there's a healthy way of doing it where it's like, I want to be recognised for doing good, helping people. Then it often ends up going completely the other way, where you
Worship.
exactly.
I would like to be a
Exactly.
guru, please.
Or I want to be a fucking dictator and be like,
Well,
you know,
yeah.
Donald. It's the same thing. So you have to control it and keep your ego in check. But like, you know, it's the thing which drives the majority of men, I think.
That's the careful thing, the ego. The thing about the ego that I've learned is that ultimately it's trying to protect us, but it's always trying to protect us from like the 8-year-old version of us. Do you know what I mean? It's like it hasn't done the update. I used to fight against my ego all the time, and I used to flip between being overconfident and too humble. And neither were very good for me. And it was very inconsistent for people to receive. So I had to find a middle ground, which was the place I didn't want to go, right? Because that meant that was hard. It's like, how do I become that person? And I think a lot of it was about learning to listen more instead of being really insecure and trying to convince people that I was what I thought they wanted me to be. I had to just sit with it and just sit with the uncomfortableness. And I think that is a lot of life. It's about sitting with an uncomfortable feeling or emotion until it truly reveals what it is, because quite often those emotions are layered. The emotion at the front isn't the real emotion. There's a few emotions back. You really get to it and you go, oh, okay, this is still all about insecurity, or this is still all about validation, or this is still all about rejection. And we build it up, and that's the ego. It stands in front of those wounds, those emotional wounds, and says, no, we're not going to get over here. But again, when you get there, quite often it's not as bad as you think it is. And second of all, there is a little lesson.
Exactly. But also, like, those emotions are things which would be categorized as negative emotions. But if they have a positive outcome, then sometimes, like, maybe just fucking accept that. Like, that's cool. It's honestly, man, like, even I always think, like, you know, the men's group that I run, right? Like, it's something which, you know, I get paid for it. It's a lot of hard work. There are some difficult conversations we have to navigate in that group. The like desire, my appetite to set that up and run it has come from a place of selfishness. Like, ultimately, it's about wanting to be recognized. It's about doing something which makes me feel good. But if that's the output, then just be a bit kind to yourself. Like, that's probably okay.
Yeah, and that's it. I think you're only really yourself when you own everything, even the stuff that you don't want to, even the stuff that you wish wasn't true, even the stuff that you've made up to protect the stuff that you don't want to be true. All of that stuff. This is it. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I have these wild conversations, because this is what it's like to be human. It's conflicting. It's messy. It doesn't make sense. And there comes to a point where you can have these great conversations and you can feel like you've come away with something, but you don't necessarily understand it or have fixed anything. You just feel better. It's as simple as that, really. But so when you say what you learned about yourself from Love is Blind, you learned more about what you would like from a relationship.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what was that?
This is the thing, mate. It's sometimes I end up catching myself out with this stuff because I've dated lots. Like, I'm fucking old. I've been single for quite a big proportion of my adult life, and sometimes I'm like, right, do people get too caught up in their criteria? Because now I'm like, I know what the kind of my physical type would be, and I'm doing my very best to be more open, accepting with that stuff, because ultimately that shouldn't be that important. I know what kind of values I want in a partner. I also have certain unrealistic expectations in terms of how they present themselves with the people that I love, for example. Like I've always said that I want my partner to be someone who I could take down the pub with my mates and they wouldn't even notice if I'd gone for an hour, you know, instant like extroversion, attraction. And part of me is like, it's unrealistic. And maybe that's a big part of the reason why I'm single, because I just need to be a bit more kind, like flexible to the people that I'm dating rather than just putting these criteria up.
That's interesting, isn't it? So it's been helpful in some ways, but in other ways it's created perhaps this area that you don't have any real answers around, so perhaps you just get overwhelmed by it a little bit.
Exactly. Like, and I think I know what my non-negotiables are, and there are someone who wants to probably live a slightly less traditional life, and someone who wants to grow, and someone who probably looks at a relationship as a partnership where, you know, we both contribute into this beautiful thing and build it together. I guess that would be my principle.
Well, one of the things that I can say, I've been married for almost 20 years and known my wife for longer and been together with her for longer. And I think it's knowing that when those horrible situations in life come along, that you've got somebody that you can deal with it with. Because life is cruel. It's fun, but there's when it gets cruel and it gets down and dirty, it doesn't hold back. And having somebody that you can rely upon, that you can be yourself, that you don't have to act around, that you can just let it all go and know it's safe to do that. Yeah. That to me is what's important.
That is huge, and it's not something which anyone would ever say when they first meet someone. You know,
that's a bit intense.
But I mean it in a really, really positive way. It's like that perspective comes from experience. It comes from a long-term relationship and understanding that is an important part of it.
There are variations of that. There are small signs of that in the beginning, little things. But ultimately, like I say, those big things that come along, that is experience. And I've learned that through that. So that's why it's valuable. But I mean, you sound like you've had a lot of things go on in your life and a lot of experiences with different relationships. And you must have learned a considerable amount from every relationship you've had, regardless of the length of them or whatever. But what is the most impactful lesson you've learned about love and relationships that you wish everybody knew?
Oh God, I'm going to try and stay away from a cliche on this, but the cliche is true. The reason why it's a cliche, it's the idea in any relationship, not just a romantic one, that by showing vulnerability, showing your flaws, showing the stuff that you feel ashamed about to a partner, it's not going to scare them off. It's going to do the opposite thing. It's going to open yourself up to them. And even that, the example that you just gave, like, I can see so many of my previous relationships where if I had a challenge or a problem, I'd feel embarrassed to ask my partner for support because I'd be worried that by asking for that support, they'd do a runner just like my dad did, basically, and feel like if I have needs, I've got to meet them myself rather than that being a burden on my partner. And, you know, what I've come to realize in the last few years is like, well, flip it on its head. Right, if your partner, if your best mate, if your mum asks you for something, it is a privilege for me to be able to support them. And it works the same the other way around.
That right there, man. Absolutely. That word privilege, you're so right. I had a moment with my wife once where very early on when I was going through something difficult, I'd had to move back into my family home after having been thrown out. And I was there for a very short time and there was this incident in the kitchen and I ran out of the house and I literally left my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, with my mum and just went. I couldn't handle the situation, so I just left. And she came down and she looked at me and she said, "You okay?" I said, yeah. And she said, "No, you're not." She just looked me right in the eyes, said, "No, you're not." And I could feel it. I was teetering on the edge of emotion. And she just like popped the bubble and then I just cried. And it's the first time I had cried in front of anybody, really. I'd always cried on my own if I could at all. And it was that when I realised, I think in that very moment, I fell in love completely. I was like, I've never met anybody that I could feel like this with. What? And there's a part of me that wanted to get the hell away from it. It felt far too vulnerable. I was like, this feels dangerous. But it's real emotion. It's recognising that that person cares about you. Doesn't always get it right. Sometimes I'm like, stop saying stuff.
Stop casting your spells on me. I just want to be a man.
Yeah, let me be John McClane, for goodness sake. Because that's the thing. You talked about masculinity at the beginning, and I think a lot of my masculine traits and my versions of masculinity came from watching films.
Right.
So I would sort of mimic what I thought was a man, like being tough and all of these different things and what that all meant. So that was an element of allowing that to be broken down by my wife. So anyway, Switching gears a little bit, what was the most challenging and emotionally painful thing that you think you've experienced amongst all of these collections of experiences in your life, and what did you learn from it?
Well, we touched on it a lot. I mean, I couldn't really move away from the abandonment stuff. There were sort of other markers in my life and other things which happened, which just made me think that every single human being you can't rely on for support. And I had an uncle who, when I was growing up, he was the most amazing, charismatic, like wonderful, wonderful guy, like the kind of guy that would just light up a room. I remember him taking me to play football down the park when I was like 14. It was like, used to take care of me sometimes, and it'd be like kick a ball over in that girl's direction so that I can go and have an excuse to speak to her. Like he was like a proper ladies' man. But as is often the case with people, I find this a lot with like people with real charisma. There's another side to them, and it's almost like they find there's an expectation on them. They have to wear this mask all the time, and then when they get home, they're fucking exhausted because they're presenting this version of themselves constantly. It just makes them so tired. And he had sort of bipolar, and he committed suicide when I was 17. So it was like another loss with a man. Again, just felt anger over, because I was like, you haven't held up your side of the deal. Like, and it's only in my adult life, again, where you start sort of preaching forgiveness, and you're like, oh man, he was going through a hard time. And so, yeah, there was just abandonment as sort of that core, to answer your question, core thing. And how that's manifested itself in my adult life is like, I'm an avoidant, like a very avoidant attachment style that I've just really, really had to work through over years and years and years, because of that fear that if I attach myself to someone, they're just going to disappear. And when you were telling that story about your now wife, like, it made me feel really emotional, because that's a point in your relationship where finally you're like, I feel seen by this person, and not because of how I present myself physically, of the resources that I can give her. It's because she knows me. And that is an amazing feeling.
Well, she didn't run from it.
Yeah.
That was it. I run away from her, I suppose, because I knew I was going to cry, and I knew I was having some emotions, and it was fairly early on in our relationship, and I did think to myself, I can't do this, and I run off, and she just kept running after me, and I was like, okay, looks like we're going to do this. Yeah. And it was very confronting. It was difficult, but I don't even know whether to say this or not, because it might not be appropriate for a podcast, but like, what do you think it's going to take for you to feel safe with love?
That's a really good question. Because I have felt safe. I had one long-term relationship when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, with somebody who just had the ability to hold that space and show that intuition, that understanding, and understand that the way that I would behave or communicate wasn't necessarily how I felt. Having that ability to read people, again, to that point around unrealistic expectations, like, very few people have that ability, but I think, sadly, I probably need someone like that.
So what do you think it will be? It will take. Is it something that somebody else has to give you, or something that you need to give yourself?
I would like to think. I mean, you hope that this is a controllable thing, and there's something which I have agency over. But yeah, I mean, to my other point, it's just about being more accepting of myself and communicating some of the stuff which I'm afraid to communicate with a partner. And even just being, this open and vulnerable with a partner, and saying, look, there are going to be points in this relationship, I really like you, but I want to run a mile. And that's not any reflection on you at all. That's just my conditioning. And it's understanding that, like, this is how that shows up. Like, if I say to you, I don't want to speak to you for 24 hours, this is a me problem. And that's a thing which you're going to have to accept.
As we wrap this up and we bring things towards the end, there was two questions I wanted to know the answers to, but let's pick one of them. One of them is, what's the emotion that you tend to avoid or dislike having the most? And the other one was, what's the best piece of advice that you've received, and why? Which one would you like to answer?
Good one. Yeah, anger's the emotion. I'm not answering your question, I'm doing the opposite. I want to feel it more, and I want to get better at expressing it in a controlled way, because...
Anger?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't feel it enough, and I think, it's part of the human condition. You need to experience every emotion, and to your point, lean into them, and understand them. But because my concern is that if you bottle that sort of thing up, then eventually you're just it's a pressure cooker environment, right? You're just going to explode. But yeah, so that's the anger question, or the emotion question rather.
As we wrap it up, could you tell us more about the Shoulder to Shoulder community and what inspired your podcast, Why Do Men? That's
Yes,
interesting.
the pod is it's a passion project, a labour of love. Like, I've exhibited a lot of bad behaviours in my love life, Johnny, over the years, particularly ghosting and avoidance and love bombing, which are all avoidant attachment style behaviours. And I've done a lot of work to understand them and understand where they come from. So I had this idea for a podcast, which is about why do men, which is all about male behaviour in dating and relationships. And we cover topics like rejection and jealousy and some more topical stuff like why don't men approach women anymore? And it's been amazing. It's just, I've learned so much. It's like a therapy session, but yeah, it's interesting because the audience is predominantly women, and like men, I struggle to reach men. I don't know about your audience, but it's really, really hard. And I think this is because it's a lot of this stuff is like men doing these things and not understanding them and not willing to be accountable for them.
That's the word, accountable. I think that men naturally gravitate towards a very avoidant style anyway.
Yeah.
And I think women are so much more open. It's like people talk about feminine and masculine. I feel like sometimes there's something else. I don't know what that is, but there's something else.
We could do a whole another podcast on this stuff because I hate this whole like binary black and white, feminine, masculine thing.
It doesn't quite fit anymore.
No, it doesn't. And the point I always make is that, right, you can have masculine tropes, behaviors. You can be strong and be protective. Like, those things can mean different things. Like, being strong, protecting your woman from a guy breaking into the house, like, that's rarely going to happen. You can protect your partner by holding space for them, like showing emotional support. That's a form of protection. It's the same as strength, man. Like, it doesn't matter how big your fucking muscles are. Like, strength is about, like understanding yourself, like having the balls to make difficult decisions, saying things which you know are going to be difficult for your partner to hear because you know that it's going to build your relationship. Like, it's all that sort of stuff. That's what a man is for me.
So with the Shoulder to Shoulder community, like what inspired that?
It was, I co-founded it with a guy called Dan Shrigley, who dropped me a note on Instagram when he saw one of the videos that I put out. It was about masculinity, and we both come at it from very different angles, which I think is a really good thing. Like, Dan's a mental health advocate. His dad suffered from severe depression. Had to sort of spend some dedicated time in a facility to be treated for it, and it really scared Dan because this guy was like this amazing strong dad to him, and he was like, it's mad how quickly those things can change. My route in was a bit different because I was like, I didn't have role models as a kid. Finally come to the age where it's hard for me to say this, but I can look at myself as a role model to my younger self, like, and I really wish sometimes that like I had someone like me around as a kid, So yeah,
well done, mate.
That's hard. It really made me feel teary saying that.
Yeah, I bet.
So we were both like, right, there's different reasons for this, but between us, we sort of encapsulate everything that's really happening for men at the moment. So we want to just create a space where men could connect, talk, grow. Like, we have values which underpin it, and like I say, it's so difficult. We have these difficult conversations in the group because people come from all different walks of life and have different opinions.
I think what's important there is, you said it earlier, like these wanky industry terms, and I think that with the algorithm and Instagram and what's popular and what isn't, it's very easy to get drawn into ridiculous conversations about what masculinity is and all these things. That's not what's real. You want to talk about real scenarios and the conflict within them without the expectation of resolution, because sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes the resolution is just to sit back and see what happens, which is the sense of helplessness that no man ever wants to experience. So we keep asking ourselves, what can we do? What can we do? Hearing nothing, not having it. Most blokes aren't having it. They're like, I don't want to do nothing. Well, you have to.
The other thing I say on that is, like, when it comes to social media and the manosphere and all these things, like, it's great that there are these influencers talking about these points, but honestly, the guys you want to learn from are the guys that have a couple of kids and a wife, and they live in a nice 3-bedroom, terraced house, and they're content. Like, they've cracked it probably more than me and you have, Johnny. Because I'm like, they don't feel the need to express themselves to get validation from other people, and they don't need to throw around what it means because they just know. They just have that inherently built in. And I genuinely believe we need to make more of those kind of everyday people, because for me, they're the role models.
I think with the social media effect on life, I think everything is amplified to an unrealistic and unachievable perspective. And I think that what those people potentially do is they look after the crocodile that's closest to their boat.
Yeah.
They don't look too far ahead and dream and wish, and that they're very content with, oh my gosh, I love my partner, I love my children,
Yeah.
I mostly like my job, all those different things. And they enjoy connecting. My brother, something I admire about him is that a couple of years ago he decided to come off social media completely. And he said, I've never looked back. And
Really?
I have to say, I have this envy about that sometimes. Because it creates all of these scenarios that are just like, if me and you were sat there having a drink together and talking, we would just laugh about how ridiculous the idea of, like, if me and you had spoke about social media as a concept 10 years ago, we would have been laughing, talking about how ridiculous and how stupid it is. Why would we do that? Do you know what I mean? It's just, as you stop and think about it, it's truly ridiculous, like the whole thing, but we still play. We still play. Does that make sense?
Honestly, yeah, like the concept is like, I was sat around the dinner table with everyone that I loved, and I decided to check a device to see a viral video about a little croissant.
Or to see whether somebody I didn't know had hearted my post.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't
Fucking
make
ridiculous.
sense. Yeah, it's so ridiculous. And and I think, like you say, those people that have got those type of lives, they're probably not doing that because they're probably sat in the garden having a cup of tea with their missus, catching up on the day, or talking to the kids, helping them with their homework, reading them a book, just living in the moment. You know?
Exactly.
So just the last question, is there anything that you'd like to pass along that could help people with their self-development?
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, look, like in my 20s, in my career, in every environment really, I was obsessed with myself and how I presented myself. And that came from insecurity, it came from ego, all of those things. But the one thing I always say to people is, people have their own stuff going on. No one gives a shit about you. And take that as a way to be more free. Because the thing that you're worried about, they don't care about. So just fucking go for it.
Absolutely love that. It reminds me of a quote I saw. The bad news is nobody cares. The good news is nobody cares. Mate, I've absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your honesty, your vulnerability, all of that. I really appreciate it far more than you can know. And I'm pretty confident. I think I want to say I think actually equally for men and women. For women, I think it gives an insight. For men, I think it gives some hope. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Johnny, man. Honestly, I've loved it. It's been really
Just before you go, just let people know how they can find you and direct them towards anything that you want to bring their attention to.
Sure. I mean, the podcast Wider Men is an SEO dream, because if you put in Wider Men Ghost, then it'll pop to the top of the search results.
Nailed it. Not many people are looking for Johnny Lawrence podcast unless they're a fan of Cobra Kai.
But yeah, I'm Stroud Tom on all my socials, so yeah, drop me a follow.
Perfect. Thank you, mate. Thank you for listening to the Johnny Lawrence podcast, and I'll see you again next week.